Pastor Doug here from Crossroads. It's great to be with you. I hope that today's message will draw you closer to Jesus.
How many of you are familiar with the phrase, loose lips sink ships? How many are familiar with this? Yeah. Now, how many of you know where it comes from, where it originates? Any of you know where it originates? Okay, one, maybe two. It originally came out of World War II. See, the Americans were deeply concerned about German espionage. And what their concern was that soldiers or other workers in the war effort would communicate incautiously, whether over the radio or even in letters back home, and they would speak too much. They would accidentally say something that might give away a unit's position or give away a mission objective or something along those lines that would then be intercepted by the Germans and used against them. And so out of this concern, they developed this campaign, Loose Lips Sink Ships, trying to keep in mind with everybody in the middle of wartime that incautious words can have consequences, sometimes for you, but sometimes for other people somewhere else. And what was interesting and absolutely necessary in wartime is also still relevant to us in our everyday life. See, when we speak incautiously, it can have consequences for us as well. It can sink our ship, or possibly even the ship of those around us. Now, if you've been with us this summer, we are studying in the book of Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs is an incredible book, full of tons of wisdom. And it has guiding principles for us that if we take them seriously, if we follow them, it can keep us out of harm's way. It can keep us from falling into pits and traps. Now, last week, we took a look at the power of the tongue and how the tongue has the power of life and death within it. And this week, we are going to be looking at two ways in which our loose lips can sink our ship. Easier said. Two ways that loose lips can sink our ships. And we're going to be looking specifically this morning at lying and at gossip. So let's start off with lying. Let's do that one first. Now, I don't know about you, but I love history. I absolutely love history. I love studying history. And there's always like periods of time or certain aspects of history that kind of grab you. And for me, one that I've been absolutely fascinated with over the last several years is the period of the Cold War and the broader history of the Soviet Union and things of that nature. I've read tons of books on it, movies, documentaries, podcasts, you name it. I've consumed so much stuff on this topic. It's really fascinating to me. But one of the best ones that I've encountered recently was a 2019 miniseries HBO did called Chernobyl. Are any of you familiar with this? It's an incredible short TV series. And if you're not familiar with it, this details the 1986 nuclear disaster at the Chernobyl power plants in the Soviet Union. And the series dives into the errors and the failures, the immense errors and failures that led to the disaster, the explosion at the one power plant and the subsequent meltdown that dispersed widespread radiation all throughout Europe, leaving huge swaths of land uninhabitable, killing untold numbers of people, and leaving even more with tremendous birth defects and higher rates of cancer and all sorts of small side effects that just continued out. And the show details what led up to those moments, the Herculean efforts at cleanup, the efforts to then cover up what happened and try to deny what was going on. It's a phenomenal piece of television. But the opening scene of this, the very first episode, we come upon a scientist, Valery Legasov, played by Jared Harris in the show, and he is dictating a letter. This is 2 years after the incident talking about his thoughts on what led up to the disaster. And the show opens with these lines. What is the cost of lies? It is not that we'll mistake them for the truth. The real danger is that if we hear enough lies, we will no longer recognize the truth. It's a powerful opening to the show. And this opener unlays the subtext for the rest of the series, basically making the case that underneath everything else and all of the massive errors and failures, the real cause of the disaster was lies. A society that had been built on lies. And the cost of the nuclear disaster is a result of a constant buildup of lies. And the idea and the point of this is that lies are capable of having immense destruction at every level, from the individual all the way up to an entire society. Loose lips in the areas of lies can absolutely sink our ship. And because of the devastating power of lies, you would understand that Proverbs has quite a bit to say about the topic of lying. So let's jump into the first one on Proverbs chapter 6. Now, as we look at what Proverbs has to say about lies, a couple of themes are going to emerge. So let's start looking at it, verse 16, or chapter 6, 16. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Number 2 on that list, a lying tongue. Proverbs 12:22. The Lord detests lying lips, but delights in people who are trustworthy. So the first theme that emerges from Proverbs talking about lying is that God hates lying, hates it. The writer here is not mincing words on how God feels about the topic of lying. It's using very strong language. God hates lying. God detests lying. Why does it use such strong language when it comes to God and his thoughts on lying? God is, in fact, a God of truth. God is the source of truth. Truth is fundamental and core to who God is. So when God encounters lying, it rubs up against the very core of his person, and he rejects it. Now, on a much different level, I recently went to a movie, and it was a good movie overall, but the soundtrack of the movie was almost all country music. Some of you would love that, I'm sure. I hate country music. I really, really don't like it. So whenever I have to counter it in any sort of large quantities, it rubs up against me and I reject it. It's against the core of who I am to like country music. Now, on a much greater level, God hates lying. It is against his core, and so he rejects it in the strongest possible manner. But there's another reason why God hates lying, and that's because of what it does to the liar and what it does to the people around the liar and to society itself, the world around it, when lies exist. So let's take a closer look at lying. We'll do a quick definition of lying. Lie is an intentionally false statement. An intentionally false statement. Now, a couple things emerge from this definition. One of them we have to think through a little bit. In the very definition of the word lies, there's an implication. It implies 2 things. It implies that reality exists, and it implies that truth exists. Because we cannot give a false statement if there is not a truth to compare it to judge the statement as false. We cannot say something that is against a reality if that reality does not exist. So by nature, to call something out as a lie means to imply that there is a truth, that there is a reality. No truth, no reality, no lies. Now, the second thing the definition talks about, intentionally. That's a key word here, intentionally, with full knowledge. With full knowledge of the truth, with full knowledge of reality. A lie is something that we speak that goes against that truth and against that reality. Now, when I was in 5th grade, I had a little notebook that we used to write our homework assignments in. And so each day we'd get our homework assignment at the end of class, we'd write it in the homework book, and that way I could take it home and figure out what to do for homework. Well, one day it was in math class, I wrote down my assignment, went home, don't remember why, didn't do my homework. So I come in the next day, and the teacher starts walking through the classroom, checking everyone's homework, and I'm like, oh man, I know I don't have it, so what am I going to do? So I thought, I got an idea. I'm going to tell my teacher that I wrote it wrong in my assignment pad. That's what I'm going to tell her. So she comes around to my desk. Where's your homework? I'm sorry, I wrote it down wrong in my assignment pad. And this is where my brilliant plan failed. Let me see your assignment book. So I hand it over. She looks at it. Of course, I'd written it down 100% correctly. And so she takes a pen. She starts writing in my assignment journal. I'm like, what is she writing? What is she writing? Turns out she was relaying the entire substance of this incident to my parents in this book so that they would have to sign it that they received it, and I had to bring it back in the next day. Man, I was in so much trouble. Oh my goodness. But that was a lie because it was intentional, and I knew what the truth was, I knew what the reality was, and I intentionally said the wrong thing. Have you been there? Have you been there? We've encountered lies. Are there specific situations that you personally feel compelled to lie? Unfortunately, we have a tendency to encounter lies all over the place, don't we? Lies in advertising. We get scams in our texts and our emails. Salespeople lie to us. Politicians and media lie to us. Sometimes our kids at home lie to us. And sometimes we lie to ourselves, don't we? So what are the reasons why people do this? Why do people lie? Well, there's a wide variety of reasons, but I'm going to give you a couple that we're going to talk about. One of the reasons people lie is to try and make themselves look good, or on the flip side, to try and prevent themselves from looking bad. I was in the subway in New York City, and they have these banners along the top of the subway. And the one time I was there, I saw one that was for a language learning app. And the phrase was really interesting. It said this was the whole campaign. Just because your resume says you're fluent doesn't mean you are. Isn't that interesting? They built the entire campaign around the fact that people lie about their language skills on their resume to make themselves look good. Another reason people lie is to cover up for personal failure or errors. That's what I had done with my teacher. I was trying to cover up for a personal failure by lying. Another one that sometimes people use is to try and not hurt someone's feelings. We lie to prevent from hurting someone's feelings. Why, yes, that definitely looks good on you. Why, no, you have not eaten too much chocolate today. We do that sometimes. There's lots of reasons why people lie. But here's a key thing we need to understand about lying. Each lie carries with it an assumption, an implicit assumption every single time we lie that we live out. And that's this, that reality can be improved through falsehood. That reality can be improved through falsehood. We may not be thinking it in our head, but when we lie, that's what we live out. We live out the idea that reality can be improved through falsehood. So why do we do that? Why do we live that out? Why do we believe that? Well, there's a clue in Proverbs. There's a clue in Proverbs that it talks about. Here's a couple verses for you. Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Proverbs 20:17. A fool or food gained by fraud tastes sweet. Proverbs 20:17. A fortune made by lying tongue. We'll stop there. So if we look at these and we look at those half of the verses, Lying seems to work for an instant, initially. The lying tongue has its moment. The fraud gets the food. The liar gets the fortune. If we just look at it at first glance, it appears as though lies have worked. I mean, you've seen this, right? You've encountered it. You maybe have lied at a particular time about something and got away with it. You didn't have to face the consequences, or you didn't get caught. Take a snapshot in that moment in time, and it looks like lying has worked. It looks like we have been able to bend reality in our direction with a falsehood, and it worked. Or so it seems. There's another quote from the Chernobyl premiere, and it says this: "Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. Sooner or later, that debt is paid." See, in the short term, it may at times seem like lies work. The problem is the story isn't over. Eventually, consequences come. Eventually, consequences have to be faced. And that's what the verses in Proverbs say. We'll go back to the verses here. Truthful lips endure forever, but lying lasts only a moment. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet, but one ends up with a mouthful of gravel. There's a good word picture for you. A mouthful of gravel. 2017, a fortune made by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a deadly snare. See, Proverbs is warning us, while lies may initially seem like they have benefit, and they initially seem like they might have work, there is consequences for lying, and those consequences end up being severe. Lying is a bad long-term strategy, and it leads to a terrible outcome in the end. Proverbs 19:5. A false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will not go free. There's a payment to the truth that will come due when we lie. Maybe it won't come today. Maybe it won't come tomorrow. Maybe it won't come for years. But it will come. And when it does, it can sink your ship, often in horrific fashion. And we've seen this. The truth came for Bill Cosby. It came for Enron. It came for Bernie Madoff. It came for so many pastors, both famous and not so famous. And it came for the Soviet Union in the form of the Chernobyl disaster. Eventually, the debt to the truth had to be paid. And if you've built up enough debt to the truth with lies, when your ship sinks, it's going to take other people down with it. For Cosby, it was his victims and the many generations of fans that he had built up. For the financial scandals, there was the clients who were defrauded. There were the people who worked in the lower levels of the organization, and many more. For those who had that happen in church, there was the pastors' families. There was the church members. In some cases, there was Christianity itself. And sometimes it's an entire society. When lies sink your ship, you don't go down alone. Are there any lies in your life that you've left that haven't been dealt with? What do we need to do if there are? What do we need to do? Well, there was another survivor of the Soviet system who wrote tremendously about the topic of lies, and that was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He had spent a number of years in one of the gulags. And he makes a similar case about the cost of lies, but he also brings it down to the level of individual. He says none of these things would have happened if individual people had not been willing to lie and been willing to accept lies. So one of the things he says to this, and one of the ways in which we can correct this, is this: 1 ounce of truth can outweigh an ocean of lies. His solution is simple, but it's not very easy. Tell the truth. Do not participate in lies. And that's much, much easier said than done. Because when we start trying to tell the truth, oftentimes we'll realize how many times we are willing to accept falsehood and how many times that we are tempted to do it. So this week, I want you to commit to telling the truth. And I want you to pay attention. Pay attention to your words. Where is it that you find yourself tempted to not tell the truth? What parts of your life, what encounters do you have, are you tempted to tell a falsehood? Maybe you will see as you encounter this and as you pay attention to it, maybe you'll realize that there's something in your life that needs to change that's causing you to want to lie. So pay attention to your words this week and commit to telling the truth. All right. The second way that loose lips can sink our ship is through gossip. Through gossip. Have you ever told something to someone and then have it get to somebody you did not intend, or maybe many someones you had not intended? When I was in college, I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and I had just recently broken up with my girlfriend maybe 2 months ago, and I would ride in the car with this guy, and we're talking. He's like, I've seen you talking with this other girl. Is there anything going on there? And I said, well, I mean, we've been talking. I don't know. Who knows? I might be interested. You know, we'll see what happens. So this guy goes and he tells my ex-girlfriend that I started dating this person. And I'm getting all these texts. What are you doing? You said you weren't dating. Drama. Let's just cut it. Drama. Incredible drama. Okay, and I go back to him and I'm like, what are you thinking? What are you saying? The definition of gossip: casual or unconstrained conversation or reports about other people, typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. Gossip. Most of us have been on the receiving end of this, haven't we? We've had this happen to us at one point or another. It's pretty awful, isn't it? We feel betrayed. We feel hurt. The trust evaporates in the relationship. We end up having to do so much damage control, way beyond what we should have had to deal with. And then sometimes there are even side consequences that come with it. Yet, despite the fact that we know how devastating gossip is, we still do it. And we're still tempted to it all the time. When we get that piece of information, we're just tempted to share it. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people engage in gossip. And some of them are for very understandable reasons. One of the first ones, one of the main reasons, is social bonding. The truth is that sharing information connects people to one another. Sharing information is one of the reasons why, and one of the ways why we connect with one another. I mean, we know this. You see a great movie or TV show, you come up to other people and you're like, oh man, have you seen this? It was so good. We need to talk about it. Or we do this with news. A breaking news story happens. Did you see what happened? You know what it is? We love to share information because it helps connect us. The problem is, when that gets misused, it easily crosses over the line into gossip. Proverbs 18:8. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. We get this comparison, right? He's comparing gossip to a good meal, to a tasty meal. Think about it. You go to your favorite restaurant. Maybe you were already hungry, and maybe the food has taken a little too long to come out. And then you see the waitress coming, and you see your steak sizzling on the plate. And as you look at it, your mouth starts to water. You can't wait. And you can almost taste it on your tongue. This is going to be so good. Comparing gossip to that same experience. When you get that piece of gossip and it's in your mind, it's just, you cannot wait to get it on your tongue. You can't wait to put it in your mouth. I mean, think about it. That's why, what is the phrase when someone has a great piece of gossip? It's called juicy, right? Juicy piece of gossip. It's that same comparison. And that's because one of the ways we connect with other people is through social bonding. Another reason that people do it, norm enforcement. Norm enforcement. Did you see what she was wearing? Do you see what he was doing? Norm enforcement. Reputation management. We gossip to try and keep ourselves on top or to keep other people down. This is that whole kind of Mean Girls effect if you've seen one of those movies. Entertainment. Sometimes people gossip for entertainment as a distraction from their own lives. Kind of that nosy neighbor type of thing. Another reason is power control, to exert influence over others or to try and control other people. What about you? Have you engaged in gossip for any one of these reasons? Is there one that's more particularly tempting than others? And we've all seen this happen. We've seen it happen in our friends groups. We've seen it happen in the workplace. Unfortunately, sometimes we've even seen it happen in our families. The problem is gossip has incredible consequences relationally. Proverbs 16, a perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. One of the consequences of gossip is a loss of relationships. How many of you have had a relationship lost as a result of gossip? And there's a reason why gossip damages relationships. If we go to Proverbs 20:19, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. Gossip damages relationships because gossip attacks relationships at their core in the area of trust. See, trust is the foundation for any relationship, business relationships, social relationships, family relationships, romantic relationships. All of them are based on trust. And gossip is so harmful and so toxic because it cuts right to the core of what relationships are built on and damages them to the root. And the ironic thing about it is that the idea that the desire for social connection is often the impetus for why people share gossip, but it's also the very thing that leads to the destruction of those relationships. You want to connect with somebody else, so you share a piece of gossip. That gossip, instead of connecting you, ends up damaging relationships. It means that people are less likely to trust you. And then that connection that you were looking for either gets broken or remains incredibly shallow, costing you the relational connection that you were looking for in the first place. It's a horrible feedback loop. When we gossip, we leave tremendous damage in our wake. Now, Proverbs uses another phrase to explain the consequences of gossip. Proverbs 26:20. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel dies down. As charcoal to embers and as wood to fire, so a quarrelsome person for kindling strife. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost part. There's a repeat of that phrase we saw earlier. It compares gossip to a fire. It says fires without fuel die out. And gossip is the fuel that continues to inflame conflict, that continues to inflame division. And whatever problem there exists, gossip is there to make it worse. One of the easiest ways and one of the hardest ways for us to lose relationships and to see a loss of relationships is to let the loose lips of gossip sink our ships in the area of gossip. It harms relationships. It damages connection. It inflames division and conflict. So this week, What I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to how you talk about others. When you are about to say something about someone else, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Why am I sharing this? Why am I sharing this? Is it helpful or is it harmful? Am I sharing it for my benefit or am I sharing it for theirs? And lastly, will sharing this break trust with someone? Ask yourself the question when you're about to share something about somebody else this week. It's amazing how often we tread right on that line or tip over into gossip. Now, if you want to respond today, the actual thing on the back of your connection card isn't 100% right. But if you want to work on lying or if you want to work on gossip this week, that first bullet point, loose lips, just check that one off. And I'd love to be praying for you this week about these issues.
Thanks again for listening. Any step you take towards Jesus is a step in the right direction. You can find out more about us at crbic.org. That's crbic.org.